Hey, welcome everybody. You're here for another episode of What's It Like? I'm Jay Liebenguth, your host, and thanks for stopping by. We've got a great show for you today. We're joined today by Kristen Job, who is the Executive Director of NAG. This is how I remember this now because it's Nebraska Association for the Gifted.
Yes.
Thank you so much for coming and joining us today. We really appreciate it, Kristen.
Thank you for having me.
Well, tell us what NAG is.
NAG, the world's worst acronym in the world, Nebraska Association for the Gifted. We are a statewide nonprofit group started in the late 1950s, about 1957, and it was started by a group of concerned parents and teachers and administrators and some lawmakers to make sure that high ability students in the state, their needs were being met. A lot of times in the classroom, we really worry about bringing the bottom up, and we don't always worry about those kids who are already well above. And a lot of times they get forgotten, or it's assumed that they'll be just fine. Whatever we do in the classroom will be just fine. They don't need anything extra or anything more, but that's not really the case because, as we all know, with brain drain and really exceptional students leaving our state, we have to start worrying about those kids. So our group was started a very long time ago to make certain that we are meeting the needs of all learners in this state.
Are you ringing the bell?
Uh-huh.
How?
Always. We do a lot of advocacy all over the state. We try to be a positive influence in the legislature, which is super ridiculously hard. As you know, school budgets are being cut everywhere. Yeah. The legislature is not always a friend of education, which is unfortunate, especially in this state. But we are doing everything we can possibly do with advocacy. And Nebraska is a very unique state. We have the metro, which is Omaha and Lincoln in the eastern part of the state. And then we have everyone else. And rural Nebraska is
Greater
a whole,
Nebraska.
Greater Nebraska is a whole different beast, so to speak. You have smaller schools. You have teachers who are doing a million different preps in one day, and then adding this to it is really, really hard. So we try to be an advocate. We try to be a support system for teachers all over the state. We are trying to do more for Greater Nebraska because that, as in my tenure as executive director, that's going to be my primary focus, is really doing more for outside of the metro area. The metro area does pretty well. There's definitely room for improvement.
There's opportunities here.
Absolutely. There are unending opportunities here, which is so great, but we can't take that for granted, and we need to make sure that there are opportunities for kids all over the state.
So what is your role? And by the way, you are also an educator. This is not a full-time job. This is
in addition to is what we like to say in the teaching world. Duties as assigned. Yes, this is another duty as assigned. I work full-time for Westside Community Schools. I am their high ability secondary coordinator, so I work with middle school primarily and high school as well. And so my role as the executive director is communication, massive amounts of communication, planning conferences. We have one every spring, and really working with a board of directors who are really top-notch and really do have the greater good in mind. We work with the legislature. We have a full-time lobbyist, well, full-time for us. We pay someone to lobby for us, and she's been with our organization forever. She's been in the legislature forever, and she is an amazing wealth of information. So it's my great honor to work with her every year. So we do lots of education. We try to get the word out as much as we can. And, being a full-time teacher doing this on top of that, sometimes it's hard, but it's super rewarding, and I love it.
It has to be, because I think that's one of the things you would want is to bring people opportunity, right? I mean, You're really trying to find a way for them to be the best them.
Correct.
So what does that look like? What is it? Curriculum? Is it?
Wow.
You mentioned education and you mentioned communication, but what does it look like at the student level?
The student level, every kid, every single day deserves to learn something new. That's what it comes down to.
We all do.
We all do. And there are kids who are sitting in classes who could teach those classes. They know the content. They know the curriculum. And that's not to say that they're being obnoxious in those classrooms, but when you go into the class already knowing that content and curriculum, you deserve a chance to learn something new or to do something different. So we talk a lot about differentiation in the gifted world and what does that mean for a student. And we ask teachers to pre-test to find out where all of their students are, not just gifted, not just lower students, but where everyone is, and use that data to make informed decisions so that you can change the curriculum based on all students. students in your classroom. So for gifted kids, maybe it's an independent study unit. Maybe it's more depth or breadth in that content level. Maybe they know a lot about the Civil War, and maybe they want to focus on a particular segment of the Civil War. So we really try to give teachers resources, ideas, opportunities to allow students to kind of guide their own learning a little bit. As teachers, that's really hard for us.
Yeah, that's another lesson plan, right?
Not necessarily, but we tend to be control freaks in the educational world. We tend to like everything, all of our ducks in a row, so to speak. So when we have kids who maybe don't fit where we want them to go, we have to give up a little control, and sometimes that's harder for all of us. And I've been in my position for so long that every day is about loss of control, and I've just given up the control and know that those kids are going to take me where I need to go and where they need to go. So every day is a new adventure, which is awesome. That's the best part of my job. I have the best job in the world. I don't want anybody to know that, because I don't want anyone to come take it from me or say we need to do something different because
Or pay you less.
Or pay me less.
Right.
I'm not sure that could happen,
Yeah.
really, in education. But we just want our group in particular, we need to make sure that those kids are learning something new every day. And it might not be in the same way that other kids are learning, and that's just fine.
Yeah, yeah. What does it look like from a higher gifted learner's perspective, going to school every day? What do they have to contend with?
They're contending with a lot of the same things. There's a certain level of bullying that can happen. You hear the term nerd thrown out a lot, and
My
gifted,
day was smarty pants. No,
yeah,
just,
smart aleck, smarty
Smart
pants.
aleck, yeah, sure.
Take your pick. It's funny because in my world, those kids have taken that word back. Just like in many minority groups, the words that have been used against you, you take back and you make them powerful. So my kids have definitely empowered that word to be something great. But for them, it's a lot of sit and get. It's a lot of sitting in a classroom and getting information that they probably already know, or it doesn't take gifted kids a lot of time to master a new concept or a new skill. They may not need all the practice that homework provides them. Other kids do need that practice. A lot of time, gifted kids, they can hear the concept, they can think about it, and they have it mastered. They don't have to do 29 math problems to master it or do that huge project or the worksheet. So for them, it can be very frustrating because they're constantly having to jump through hoops, which they could tell you if you asked. They don't need to jump through it, and here's why. Most of them have different social emotional needs. A lot of gifted kids, their brains have developed so fast that their brains are on a completely different level than their bodies. So their brains may be that of a high school kid, and their body might be of a fourth grader. So we call that asynchronous development. And so they have different emotional needs. They sometimes need more social skill training. Sometimes their brains are so just going a million miles an hour, they forget the little soft skills that we expect all kids to understand and learn. So we work on different social emotional training. We work on social skills. We work on all kinds of things like that.
Does your group help with that then? I mean, is that part of, that's beyond curriculum? That's something that's more about, you mentioned social skills.
Yep. Is
that work that you do?
It is. It's an area of gifted work that sometimes gets kind of thrown to the wayside a little bit. We tend to think school counselors should do more of that social emotional work, yet most school counselors have absolutely no gifted training or endorsement or have even taken a class to work with gifted kids, and it's a different beast because their brains are so much more developed than a lot of times their emotions are, and they sometimes can't make sense of the world. They can on an intellectual level, but not always on an emotional level. So we do provide some support, but again, there are other groups that really focus. There's a gifted group called SING, so meeting the social emotional needs of gifted students, and they're a national group, and they do amazing work in this area. So we kind of rely on a lot of what they do, and we help pass that on to teachers and schools.
Are you empowering these kids to kind of do some of the work on their own by providing them with resources?
Absolutely.
Okay.
Absolutely. The kids I work with, I know them on a really personal level, and we have different groups of identified kids. You have your math kids, you have your reading kids, and then you kind of have those kids that we call whole gifted kids, where they're
just smart at everything.
They got it going on in every realm. So, we work on what we need to based on the student. I try to keep my program as individual as I possibly can. No matter how many kids I have in my caseload, we really try to figure out where that kid is and what they need and make sure they have what they need.
What is your interaction like with parents? It seems to me, I have a daughter who teaches elementary school, and I have other teachers in my life. And I know that interface between the parents sometimes is a time of frustration and maybe even misinterpretation. Sure. I just wonder what it's like when you have a child that's gifted.
Parents need to be their gifted kids' biggest advocates. A lot of times, giftedness, you see it at home first before kids even get to school. You notice things. You'll have a precocious reader. You'll have a kid who just learns their math facts ridiculously quickly, or they have a passion for a very specific area, and they continue that learning on their own, not directed. So a lot of times parents see all of these things before they ever get to school. By the time they get to school then is when, we start throwing standardized tests at kids, and we start doing IQ tests and all of the identification tools that we use to identify gifted kids. But parents need to be those kids' best advocates. If the kid is coming home saying they're bored in school and they didn't learn anything new, then those parents need to be a great advocate. It never needs to be an adversarial relationship, ever. No. I mean, parents should just feel very free to contact teachers and say, you know what, my kid, I think they know all of this. What can we do different? And I've worked with amazing parents who truly are their kids' best advocates and have their kids' needs in mind, absolutely. And it's a great working relationship most of the time with parents and teachers. And a lot of times the teachers, if they've not had gifted training, which is not required by any means in the state usually in teacher training programs, you get a 3-hour class that covers SPED and gifted all in one shot. And as you know, those are very different ends of the spectrum. Mm-hmm. So teachers don't always have the tools and the understanding of what it takes to work with a gifted kid. And if you have a smaller school, you may only have one gifted kid in the entire building. So what do you need? You need help, and the parent needs to be a great advocate for that kid.
Yeah. You mentioned that there are some kids that are high in math, maybe high in reading, and there's the holistic one. What do you do with a child that really has like a specific talent like math? Is it important really to fill in all the other blanks, or should we be working on the one that already has the skills?
All of the above.
Okay.
A lot of schools have acceleration policies. If you have a kiddo who truly is gifted in a specific content area, schools will look at where they are in their learning, what they know, and then kind of test based on whether it's like the next year's end of the year test or the next year's chapter test. And my district in particular, we have a very solid acceleration plan, and it is okay to accelerate kids. Kids need to be where they need to be. And if you've got a 4th grader who needs 6th grade math, there's really nothing wrong with that.
Right.
Socially, those kids will do better because that's where their brain is. Their brain is where those 6th graders' brains are. Their body might not be, but their brains are. And in bigger schools, that's a lot easier, and we know that. In rural and outside of the metro area schools, it's a lot harder because transportation might be involved.
Yeah.
If you have different kids going to different schools, they may not offer that class. Scheduling might be involved. If you're in a smaller district where all of the freshmen are taking math at this hour and all of the sophomores are taking math at this hour, you may not always be able to accelerate that kid based on their need. Luckily, online programs have really helped, and they've filled in a lot of those gaps. And they're a great tool for smaller schools and schools that are not always having all of the resources that big schools do.
That was my next question, is what role does technology play, especially in those schools in greater Nebraska that don't have maybe the resources within the building? Is technology a big part of that?
It is key. It is so key. And I think it really empowers those gifted kids too, because they're finally able to they're able to work at a level that they should be working at. And so that's empowering, and you're finally being challenged and you're not bored. And boredom, as we all know, can lead to disruptions in some cases. So technology is key. And I think it allows them to find their online community. There are programs like Khan Academy that really work you. They continue to match where you are in your learning. And there's other students out there who are like you. If you're the only person like you in your town or your school, you need to find that community. And I think that's where technology is key.
Yeah. Pop culture for a second. Big Bang Theory, the Numbers movie. I can't remember about the women at NASA. All of those kinds of things have made it cool to be a nerd again. Are those things resonating with the kids?
Absolutely. They're watching everything.
Awesome.
They see everything. Hidden Figures.
Thank you, Hidden Figures.
My district took a bunch of young girls to Hidden Figures just to empower them and show them that girls should be in STEM. They should be in science and technology and engineering and math. Yeah, they notice. They take notice.
Yeah. So I'd like to turn this a little personal now. What is your vision? What if you had your magic wand out, what would you have as a resource?
Money. It always comes down to money. If we funded gifted education like we fund special education, I think it would be truly amazing what these kids could do. Special education receives a ton of federal money, as they should. Every program should. But if we put the emphasis on gifted education, and let's face it, these kids are going to be our next innovators, our next geniuses who are going to create amazing things. If they had more resources behind them at an earlier age, I can't even imagine the potential. It's almost like we need to think back to the space race times. We need to throw money at where all of the creative thinkers are. And I think a lot of our creative thinkers are in gifted ed, and we just need to give them more resources.
Well, it's not like we don't have plenty of things that are challenging us that could use better minds and more creative solutions and innovation. Talk about that a little bit. Where do you think that we can really make some? Because I think ultimately a legislator or anybody who's looking at contributing to that particular area is going to look for an ROI. So what's the ROI if we invest in gifted?
Kids need the chance to solve real-world problems. And we need more adults in communities to give kids chances to do that. We need more mentorships. We need, even in small towns, companies to come in, whether it's a small business or a large ag business, come in and say, we have this problem. What can you do for us? Kids aren't inhibited. They don't see some of the problems that adults, we put limitations on our thinking a lot as adults.
Well, that won't work.
Yeah,
you
exactly.
You just jump there.
Exactly. And kids don't have that thinking. And I think if more adults would come in and let kids solve their problems, they would be amazed. And they would see that the potential is definitely already there. If we could just empower these kids by giving them real-world problem solving, I think it would be amazing. Our problems would melt away. They wouldn't be solved, but we would definitely have more creativity in our world.
You know better because you've been involved with the legislature for longer, but is part of the thinking there that if we educate these kids that we're going to lose them to someplace else?
I think there's probably some thought there. I think for so long it's been ingrained in education that we have to bring the bottom up. And yes, sure, I'm all for that. I want every kid to be able to read, absolutely, at a certain level by a certain time. But I think there's just been this, we've all been in school. We've all had those kids who were the smart kids in class who knew everything. A lot of times they ended up tutoring everyone else. I think there's just this it's almost laziness that we think they'll be fine. They'll figure it out. They'll fend for themselves, when really that's not fair. And we should be fending for them.
Yeah, I think that is an issue of fairness. It seems to me that if, and I think back to the one-room schoolhouse days, those are kids that they must have been doing that in some way there, that they were serving the older kids while they were trying to bring along the younger kids, right?
Absolutely.
And probably some of that existed because those older kids were helping to tutor.
Sure.
And any time that you can teach someone else, I think that drives the learning in for you a little bit deeper. So what are the answers?
If I had those answers, wow, I would be off speaking all over the place right now.
This is a good place to start as any.
It is. Fair isn't always equal and equal isn't always fair. And I think a lot with gifted programs, we have to fight that all the time because there will be administrators who say, well, if it's good for the gifted, it's good for everyone. No, No, it really isn't, because not everyone is at that level. We all need something different. We all need to be differentiated for. If I could have everything differentiated for me, it would be amazing.
Yeah.
That may not be in the adult real world, but why couldn't it be in schools? Why can't schools be more reactive to where students are? We do it really, really well on the lower end of the spectrum. We need to start doing a better job on the higher end of the spectrum as well.
Have you applied some of your gifted learners to your own problem, to this problem of how do we make more opportunities for those that are gifted?
Funny that you should ask that. Actually, in different ways, yes. I have a amazingly gifted graphic designer who happens to be a freshman in high school, and I gave her our very old, tired, bored NAG logo and said, go to town. And she's at the point now where she has completely rebranded us and wants to present to my board of directors. And I mean, this is a 15-year-old girl who has absolutely no qualms about Skyping in or Zooming into a meeting with a bunch of old teachers and showing everything that she has. So yeah, I think as gifted teachers, we just instinctively do that. We throw everything back to the kids. Well, if you're bored, what can we do about it? Well, if we don't have this, what can we do about it? Those kids are amazingly creative. So yeah, I think they're in my new role in this position as an executive director, I will absolutely bring the kid portion back in. I think as a group, we've been lacking that for a few years. We've got great teacher base, we've got good support, but we need that kid base who is saying, well, I am one of these kids. This is what I want. This is what I need. And this is what I can do for you, because they can do a heck of a lot more for us than we can do for them.
I think that so often we just kind of shuffle them to the side and say, it's nice, you're cute. Let's just stay over
You're
here.
just a kid.
But those folks have lots of exposure to the same technology and the same resources that are, playing the nightly news, if that's where we need to come up with that. So tell me a story. Tell me a story about someone that you felt like you really helped in a gifted program, that you really saw them come back and say, wow, thank you for advocating for me.
There's a few different ones. Every year when my seniors graduate, I don't know who makes them do this at the high school level, but they have to write thank yous back to someone who did something for them, which, most of the kids roll their eyes and grumble, oh, here we go again. But I used to teach a program called Destination Imagination. And there was no teaching, it was facilitating. And that's the cool thing about gifted teachers. We don't really do a lot of teaching.
Right.
We do a lot of facilitating. And I think that's where in education we're kind of missing the mark in general, is that we need to be the facilitator. We don't need to be the person on stage. We need to be the person on the side saying, you figure all this out. And that program was an amazing program. It was a creative problem-solving program. There were certain problems you had to solve, but most of it was completely open-ended. And those kids, they formed a team, usually 5 to 7, and I got them out of a different class that they didn't really need. And for, 40 minutes every day, they had to butt heads with each other and solve these problems while I sat there going, what about, throwing different scenarios or different things they hadn't thought about, really not doing much other than offering them space and getting the heck out of their way. So those kids every year, they would complain and they would bemoan all of the fighting that came a part of that group. At the end of the year, we made it to global competition every year, and they did exceptionally well. And those kids, 5 to 7, had the best teamwork skills, had the best communication, had the best collaboration, and that they used from, the minute they went to high school on. And they always bring up that experience, that was something that at the time they didn't realize how great it was, but we're so thankful that they had that experience later.
See, to me, that's beyond the thinking part of it, because the socialization that we talked about earlier, that is really where we all kind of fall down.
Yeah.
I know you have an idea and I have an idea. Let's see if we can take the best of those two ideas and synthesize them into something that'll really work. And it's hard to let go of my good idea when I know it's hard for you to let go of yours too.
Yep.
So how do we teach that beyond gifted? How do we teach that to everybody?
This is one of those experiences where that real world problem solving, getting a bunch of people at a table, giving them a problem, and having them work it out. And that's just it. Kids, they hold on to those ideas. Well, that's my idea and it's the best. Well, my idea is better. It's my idea. It's better. And I think having them work in a team, knowing that, yes, your idea might be great, but that idea might be better. Let's let it sit. Let's let it fester. Let's work out all of the angles and see in the end which ideas we can combine to make the best ones. We don't have space for that in schools right now, which is really, really unfortunate. We have standards and we have all of these things, of these things that we have to do,
Boxes to check. Yeah.
But we don't give time for just problem solving. And every kid, and this is where every kid would benefit for a chance every single day to work together with different people, and that's key. We need to get some diversity in there and battle it out, and in the end, have a product to show for it. And I think that's where the community has to get involved. We need people from the outside to come in and say, here's your problem, help us figure it out. And I think it would be amazing.
Short of money, what could the rest of us do? How could we participate? How could we be a resource?
If you have a problem, take it to a kid. Allow for a mentorship. I think in education and in general, mentorships are kind of scary things. Mm-hmm. There's a lot of vetting that needs to happen, of course, for safety for everyone. But I think if you have a unique situation where you could work with a group of students and allow them a chance to do something tangible, something real, and see results, I think that would be an amazing benefit for everyone.
Give folks the contact information in case they want to reach out or they want to learn more about your organization.
We have a website. We're online, anygifted, anygifted.com. Yep, that's our website. NE, nebraskagifted.com. Gmail, anygifted@gmail.com. We're on Facebook, not as much as we should be. We're on Twitter at the same address, anygifted. That's how you can find us.
Thank you so much. We don't say it enough, but as a teacher, thank you for your service, because it truly is something that happens every day in this state. It happens every day in classrooms all over the country. And we really, really appreciate you going to bat for all of our kids, but especially those gifted kids.
Thank you.